We're ready to get started with today's session, which is on tech careers and learnings for the next decade. And my name is Rashdeep Dua, and I'm part of the developer relations team at Salesforce. And before I start the presentation, just give me a second. Yeah. I'm part of a team where our role is basically to interact with external developers and interface between our product teams, which is the R&D team, and the external developers like you, who are actually building apps on top of our platforms like Force.com. Now, a very important thing to remember is today's webinar is not only about Salesforce and its products or what we have to offer. It's a more generic webinar where we're going to tell you about what we have learned over years on where the industry is going, what's happening with the learning platforms, and how you should uh, pick up these signals from the community and use them to basically build your own career. Now, this is a quote which I wanted to uh, use in my presentation. Basically says that illiterate of 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. See, what's happening is those days are gone when you could actually just focus on one platform, one language, either it's Java or .NET or maybe some specific module of Oracle or SAP, and build your whole career around it. The things are changing so fast. Every 6 months, a new language, a new framework is coming in the market, and developers are really struggling to keep up with the pace of technology. So with that, keeping that in mind, people have to basically relearn everything, or maybe move on to new languages very, very fast. And even professional developers, people who have been around for about 10 years, 15 years, they have to pretty much compete with college kids who are just passing out or are still in their college and who are actually able to innovate much faster. So this is a challenge which we are facing in today's world. And this presentation is about how to overcome that challenge and what you should do to shape your career. So this talk covers the present state of the industry. So when I say industry, I'm specifically talking about the cloud technologies and software industry in general, and rise of new technology stacks. How the state of the industry and rise of new technology stacks, they are related to each other, and how both these points affect the future of tech careers. And towards the end, we'll also see what Salesforce has to offer, how it can help you overcome the challenges which you face in your career, and how it can actually help you shape your career in a specific direction. And in the end, we learn about learnability and online learning as a movement. When I say movement, it's basically not specific to Salesforce. It's a movement which is happening in academia and professional space, and what we at Salesforce are trying to do to make sure that this movement is captured through our platforms, and also developers and the ecosystem in general can benefit from what we have to offer. Just a second. Yeah. So so this is a presentation which this slide I'm sure you guys must have seen zillions of times, but again it's very important that I emphasize on this. So every 10 to 15 years, what happens is that we go through a shift in the technology stack at a very, very basic level. So let's start with 1960s to 1980s. This was an era of mainframes, era of where companies like IBM were built, and it was a time when large mainframe machines on the server side and very, very thin terminals on the client side. And most of the logic was residing on the server side. And what we were doing was basically uh, just writing business logic in a procedural language. And then in towards 80s, from 1980s to 2000, the whole movement changed to the client server mode. It was an era of x86 and how Intel and Microsoft as a combination shifted a lot of workloads from mainframes to client servers. So here we are talking about getting compute out of a very, very I would say cost intensive structures to structures which were not so cost intensive. So which meant that more companies, more corporates were able to use this technology and use it to run their enterprise workloads. So client server also meant that the adoption of technology in corporate world increased. But there was still a challenge. The challenge was of connectivity. The internet and the network bandwidth was still very, very expensive. So we had a lot of client server installations, but all of them were running in silos. So they were not connected to each other. And that is where things started changing towards end of 90s and early 2000 when internet really took off. When internet took off, what actually happened was that suddenly HTTP became very popular. People started writing the client side using HTML, and it was HTML 1.0. And what this meant was basically your client side again became thin, the server side became heavier, and it was also hosted. The hosted model took off. That is where portals took off and the whole .com boom started. So this movement went on from 2000 to 2005. And this was the era, where we were moving from client server to portals, where companies like Salesforce were born. We were talking about 1998. So this was an era where even the term cloud was not defined. So you can understand the gravity of the shift when and how some companies like Salesforce, they leveraged this shift and used it to build a whole new model of serving applications for the enterprise. And then when the next phase was from the year 2006 to 2016, when cloud computing in general and AWS in particular launched its cloud. So cloud as a definition was defined during that time frame. I'm talking about 2006, 2007. And the most important reason for the cloud to take off was, one, internet connectivity became low, and second was people realized that this is a model where people are not buying infrastructure, but they're renting infrastructure. And they're renting infrastructure not by months or by years. We're talking about minutes or by hours. And companies like Google and Amazon, they were able to figure out, hey, this can be used not only to host our own applications, but this can also be offered as a service. And if you look at the last section of my slide, you'll see that there are three boxes on the right-hand side which talk about mobility, IoT, machine learning, and big data, and also deep learning. Now, a lot of people say that these are the movements which are happening and which are, in silos. But the reality is cloud, big data, IoT, all of them are feeding into each other. So why I say they are feeding into each other, the reason is because big data became successful because cloud made it cheaper to host applications which need vast amount of compute and storage. Now IoT is basically a recent phenomenon. Now IoT is also a very specific use case where it's like a machine-to-machine interaction. So when I say a machine-to-machine interaction, what I mean is that they're like cheap sensors which are generating the data. It's like a time series data which is getting consumed on the client side, and the same data can then be analyzed using deep learning or machine learning models. So this means that we are in the midst of a shift which happens once in 10 to 15 years, and we as individuals and developers who are basically trying to figure out what should we do with our career, how should we uh, position ourselves so that we can leverage these changes, right? So before we move on to the specifics of what's happening in the market, I wanted to spend some time again on this stack of cloud offerings. So I'm sure some of you must have seen this stack quite a few times. Important thing to remember here is not the stack itself or why infrastructure is below Paas and why SaaS is above Paas. It's basically saying that the bottom of any cloud offering is basically infrastructure, which is hosted somewhere. So when I say infrastructure, I'm talking about compute, storage, networking. All of them are combined in a mix. All of them are virtualized, and they are offered to people for rent. Now here the key thing is, in infrastructure, you have full control over the machine, whether it's a physical machine or a virtual machine. You are still responsible to take the backups. You're still responsible for configuring the network. You're still responsible for configuring the volumes. The difference is you're not owning the infrastructure. You are basically you're getting a sliced portion of the infrastructure. So the next stack is basically platform as a service. When we say platform as a service, uh, so platform as a service was a very, very different kind of offering. I remember in 2008 when Google App Engine was launched. It was basically supporting very few languages. It was specific for a particular use case. For example, when Google App Engine launched, it was all about uh, supporting apps which were transient in nature, like social apps. And App Engine had a very, very specific backend which was called Bigtable, and it was supporting only Python. And then they started supporting Java later. But as we moved on from 2008 to 2016, what happened is that people burned their hands with Paas. Except companies like Salesforce. We'll come to that, why Salesforce was successful as a Paas company versus some of the other offerings in the market. Now Paas got morphed from a pure play offering into an offering which is basically verticalized. What this meant, the Paas offerings which became successful were specialized offerings. So for example, if you look at Force.com, it's actually a visual pass. When I say visual pass, it's basically you're using the browser to basically do half of the configuration or building of your application. And all the programming is also done within the same browser using an inbuilt developer console which comes with the application in the browser. The pure play Paas platforms like App Engine were not able to cater to either enterprise or social apps, right? So they didn't succeed. Now then there were companies like Heroku which got acquired by Salesforce. They were successful because they were not trying to be a very, very broad offering. So Heroku was all about targeting to startups, Ruby on Rails developers who wanted to host their application, and they didn't want to touch infrastructure on their own. So what I'm saying is that the whole Paas market was a very fragmented market, and initially Paas didn't succeed. And if you look today, what's happening is that all these three layers, there is a overlap in these layers. So the pyramid which you see on the left hand side no longer exists in the same form. Today what's happening, companies like AWS or Amazon Web Services, they are offering infrastructure as a service. They're also offering something called as AWS Lambda, which is basically a form of Paas, right? Then there are companies like Google App Engine or Heroku who are trying to offer infrastructure offerings, like you could expose IP addresses, you could whitelist IP addresses, you could actually set up a private dedicated application, right? You could have a non-shared database. So what this means that there is now a considerable overlap between the Paas and infrastructure, and the infrastructure players are moving into the Paas space. Now, and another important thing which has happened is the advent of containers. So I'm sure all of you have heard about how popular Docker has become, or the containment principles like C groups, namespaces, they are very popular, right? So what's happening is that most of the vendors, they are trying to use containers behind the scenes, right? So, and container vendors themselves are trying to offer cloud orchestration services. Now, will you consider a Docker orchestration engine to be a Paas or an infrastructure? Now, the same orchestration engine is also being offered by most of the infrastructure offerings, right? So what this means is that landscape has become much more muddled than what it used to be when this whole cloud had taken off in 2006. And this means more trouble for developer who has to choose their stack. Should I, as a developer, should I focus on infrastructure? Should I focus on Paas? Or should I become an expert in one of the SaaS offerings, right? So before we go into trying to answer those questions, I wanted to spend some time on the cloud timeline. This is a very interesting diagram. If you see, let's go from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. 1998, Salesforce was founded. As we discussed in the previous slide, 96 to 2000 was a place where people were moving from client server to .com kind of architectures or portal based architectures. So Salesforce as a company was founded in that period of time when people were becoming more comfortable with browser based applications. So we as a company decided we will never offer on-premise software. So all our software will be served as a pay-as-you-go model, right? So this was a pretty important shift in the thinking, and also from a SKU perspective, it was a very different kind of offering. So in 2005, another very important thing happened. So Amazon decided that in addition to using the infrastructure on their own, they would also like to offer it to external developers. And it was so easy to use, and it basically was a big hit with developers. So this is where, when with Salesforce and Amazon, this is where people realize that developers can play a very important role in success of a platform. So all of us should be happy that we have basically future of very large platforms in our hands. It's up to us to make them successful or not so successful, right? 2007, if you see the timelines, that is where Salesforce launched its platform as a service. So in 1998, what we offered was a CRM, which was a SaaS offering. But we realized that we want to offer a generic platform, not a platform which is just there to customize CRM. So what this means is that you can use host.com and program in a specific language like Apex or Visual Force and build any application. It could be like a financial application, it could be a HR application, and so on. At the same time, another startup was founded, Heroku. So back then, Heroku was not part of Salesforce. It was a startup, and it was very successful with Ruby on Rails developers, right? And similar things happened with GAE, like it was Google App Engine's platform as a service, which started and it was not very successful, right? So people, in fact, a lot of people burnt their hands with platform as a service. So if you look at that graph, there's a pyramid, right? There is infrastructure at the bottom, Paas in the middle, and SaaS. So SaaS became very successful. So Salesforce was one of the leaders, but infrastructure was very successful. AWS was the leader, but Paas in between was struggling, except maybe Force.com, where people didn't realize initially, but if you look back, then we realized that, actually it was one of the more successful Paas platforms. And if we move on to 2016, let's specifically talk about a company called Paas. So Paas was basically platform as a service only for mobile applications. So they were very, very popular. The challenge there was they were not able to monetize what they had to offer. When I say monetize, what this means is they didn't know how to make money out of the platform as a service. So Paas, because their user base was so huge, they got acquired by Facebook sometime 2014 or 15, 2014 I think, and within a few months, or I would say about a year, Facebook decided to shut down Paas. What this meant was that even if you are basically backed by a very large player, it's not necessary the future of the service is secure. So this has a very, very important meaning for all of us as developers, that which platform should I focus on? Just imagine if you had, invested all your time in learning Paas and suddenly that service goes away. So all the skill sets which you have acquired basically go for a toss. So that is where Salesforce comes into picture. So all our platforms like Force.com and Heroku. So these are the platforms on which businesses have been built, and these are the platforms on which we make money. So what this means, so it's a sustainable model. Same is also true for AWS. It's a sustainable model because Amazon makes money. So as a developer, you should basically focus on platforms which are sustainable, backed by large companies, and also have survived the test of time. So we already talked about trying to define Paas. As I said, Paas is not a single market anymore. It's not a service which you can easily define. So is Paas still a viable career option? Of course. So Paas is getting morphed into very, very different kind of offering. One is, as I said, people are trying to see if what Docker offers can qualify as Paas. Force.com and Heroku are obviously specific examples of Paas. And if you see the slide, you can also figure out from the previous slide, the Paas market is so jumbled up right now, and Force.com and Heroku are one of the few last man pure play Paas vendors in the market. Now, Cloud Foundry was a company which was, hyped off from VMware, but Cloud Foundry has been very successful as a Paas as well. The difference is they are in the private Paas player. So that's another important offering you can look at. It will give you a good perspective, right? And then obviously there are offerings from Google like Kubernetes, which is how you can orchestrate containers in either a private cloud setting or a public cloud setting. So Kubernetes and Docker play a very important role in helping blur the lines between Paas and infrastructure as a service. So our suggestion is basically you look at the market, look at what's happening in the public Paas, focus on Force.com and Heroku, but you should also look around what's happening in the private Paas and how container technologies like Docker are changing the whole dimension of this particular segment. So what are the opportunities and challenges for developers in this space? So knowing languages and single platform stack is not good enough anymore. What this means that if you are, gone are the days when you could say that I am a Java developer or a .NET developer or an Oracle developer, and there will be like a lot of offers on your way. So these days people are looking at all the specific offerings in areas of growth. When I say areas of growth, what I mean is, cloud, big data, IoT. So the focus, knowing a language is given. What else can you do with that language? Can you use it to build interesting cloud applications? Do you have skill set in building the next algorithm in machine learning, and so on? So basically what you need to do is learn programming. Obviously that is the base, but you should also learn where it can be used. With cloud becoming very important, you should know how to manage, how to deploy an application to the cloud, how to take the application through the DevOps lifecycle, basically in the development mode, in testing mode, and production mode, right? So, and the reality is that even if you focus on one particular company, right, or one particular product, within a few years, we have seen that tech giants becoming legacy vendors, right? So, even if you focus on a successful company like Salesforce, what's going to happen is evolve very fast, right? And so we were a CRM company, then we became a platform company. Now we're becoming a company which offers IoT and maybe machine learning. So you as a developer need to also morph your skills along with the particular stack what you are focusing. So as I was talking about, how the Java and .NET jobs are going down. So this is some interesting data which I pulled up from Indeed.com. You can see that the green line is basically .NET, how it's going down. The Java jobs and SAP jobs are drying up, and the Oracle jobs are mostly flat. So what this means that the traditional focus areas for most of the developers when they're starting their career, they will no longer guarantee a job. You need to focus on the new pillars, which are interesting problems in their own right, and they build on top of platforms like Java, .NET, but they're focused on higher level of abstraction in terms of problem statement. We're talking about cloud. How do you use cloud to manage applications? How do you build applications on the cloud? How do you leverage data which is very large in size? How do you manage that data? How do you learn or drive meaning out of that data? So analytics, deep learning, these are very important, right? So mobility has two angles. One is human to machine and the other is machine to machine. So as a developer, you should see that, okay, I'm learning this particular platform. Now, how can I align my learnings on this platform, on these three pillars? So, so these are some of the screenshots I've taken from a few magazines and articles online. So you can say that top 10 paying IT jobs, they were all about either cloud or big data. In this particular screenshot on the left hand side, you can see AWS, Salesforce being mentioned. So what this means that your marketability in the world will be much higher if you think about these higher level abstractions instead of thinking about lower level abstractions like Java uh, or maybe a database uh, specific skill set. Now, what does Salesforce have to offer? So Salesforce, I would say, is a cloud platform which has stood the test of time. So we have been around for a very, very long time. I mean, if you remember a few slides back, I mentioned uh, we started in '98. Our Paas offering got launched in 2007. So our Paas offering alone has been around 9 years, and we are considered the leader in Paas Magic Quadrant by Gartner, and we are growing at the rate of 30% per annum. What this means is that you as a developer can definitely use this momentum and gain edge over others in the market. So we are not trying to say that Salesforce is the only thing you need to learn, but Salesforce plays an important role. Why it plays an important role? Because even our Paas platform is very closely tied to a use case, which is how do you manage customer data, right? How do you manage the sales cycle? How do you manage data which impacts the top line of any company, right? So there is a use case. So any platform which has succeeded today in the market is always tied to a use case. You take Amazon. Amazon became successful because it started off with being tied to retail. And AWS was actually built to serve Amazon.com, right? Microsoft became successful because their cloud was built to support Bing and Office 365. Force.com became successful because it was built to support the CRM. So that's what I'm saying. These are the offerings which have stood the test of time, and Salesforce being up there in terms of cloud offering, it has a very, very strong use case and market to offer you as a developer. So not only that, we also have a very large and vibrant Salesforce community, I mean, which is growing at the rate of 20 to 30% per annum. And last but not the least, we have a very, very strong offering in online resources, which I'll talk about in a few seconds. So let's move on to the next slide. Second. So Salesforce Developer Connection is an important offering we have, which connects you as a developer with our platform and what we have to offer. And it's a flow of knowledge on both the sides. We're talking about 2.5 million developers worldwide, fourth largest software company in the world, growing at the rate of 30% per annum. So when you are building applications, so you can build two kinds of applications, right? Either applications which are consumer facing or enterprise focused. So Force.com is a platform which is very nicely fits in with the enterprise ready applications for employees or partners. And Heroku, which we acquired, is an offering which complements what we have in Force.com. So Heroku basically serves consumer-facing apps. So you cannot use Force.com to build consumer-facing apps. The reason being that it's tied to a user license. But Heroku is basically built for consumer-facing apps where you can have millions of consumers uh, either using your app or consuming information, and with a very, very low cost overhead. And then we have offerings, how you can connect both of us. There have been numerous cases where our customers have taken Force.com and their employees and the internal teams are looking at Force.com. The same data is replicated on Heroku, and there is a consumer-facing app also. So build applications, consumer-facing applications using Heroku and Force.com as the backend. Obviously, we provide all kinds of APIs which you can use to integrate to the outside world. It's very much possible you don't want to use Heroku for your consumer app, you want to use something else. So you can use Force.com REST APIs. And that is where the developer connection becomes very important. We have forums, we have a very strong Stack Overflow community. At the same time, you have Trailhead as an online learning platform. And I wanted to spend a few minutes on our developer community. We have about 300 plus meetup groups across the world and 75,000 members. So if you are in a particular city, please go to our meetup site and search for the nearest meetup and join it. And I'm sure you'll find numerous resources, and the meetups happen very, very often, where you can go and learn about the platform and also share your experiences. So the largest groups in terms of sizes are in San Francisco, then Bangalore, Hyderabad, also very, very vibrant community, and London and New York are another big user groups or developer groups we have. So moving on, so what are the trends in learning? Till now we have spent a lot of time talking about what's happening in the cloud space, how things are changing very fast, how the stacks and platform offerings change every 6 months. So how do developers learn? Should you be investing in learning offline in classrooms? Should you take a few months off, go back to school, or should you try to do it online? So what we are seeing is not only in the corporate world, but also in the academic world, the breakdown of traditional learning models. Basically, the classroom is definitely nice and very convenient for people who are in the learning mode in full time, as a full-time student. What about professional developers or developers who need to relearn every 6 months? So the traditional learning modes don't work out. For them, self-learning online is becoming a medium of choice. So if you go to sites like Coursera, Udemy, EDX, you'll see that the courses are so popular. I've seen some of the popular courses having 80,000 to 100,000 enrollments. And I would say this is where the future of learning lies. So when I say this is where future of learning lies, it's going to happen not in the classroom, but online, either through video or through text or a combination of the two. And all these platforms are also trying to see how they can measure the success and also make it interesting for people to be engaged. And that is where Salesforce not only provides you a cloud platform, we also provide a very robust online learning platform called Trailhead. So Trailhead, I believe, is the only learning platform backed by an enterprise and a healthy ecosystem. If you go to EDX or Coursera, it's basically university driven. So what those guys are trying to do is use the curriculum which is taught in some of the top universities and bring it online. What we are trying to do is something slightly different, that you are a developer or a student who wants to come to the cloud and Salesforce ecosystem in particular. So instead of trying to go to classroom, or in addition to going to the classroom, come online, start learning with us through our text-based learning with verification process also. So it's basically a gamified learning platform, which once you get hooked, it's very difficult to come out of it. So before we come towards the end of the presentation, I wanted to spend like few seconds. You can get started on Trailhead on this particular URL if you have already not done so. And I won't spend too much time on this, but it's basically for you as a developer to take a call. So it's not only about Trailhead, it's also about trying to innovate with your career, trying to learn as much as possible and broaden your skills and not focus on a single platform. I would say in addition to Trailhead, you should also definitely go to Coursera, Udemy, try to learn new offerings, because even in a particular field like machine learning, which has been around for a very, very long time, we are seeing things change very, very fast of late. So definitely there's a lot to learn in those platforms as well. So before we go to Q&A, I wanted to spend like a few seconds on this quote from Alice in the Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. So it says, "My dear, here we must run as fast as we can just to stay in the same place. And if you wish to go anywhere, you must run twice as fast as you are running right now." So it's also very appropriate quote for developers in general, and for cloud developers in particular, because this is a space which is changing so fast that we have to learn as fast as we can and hope that whatever we learn stays relevant for at least a year. So with that, we come towards the end of this webinar. To summarize, it's not about learning a particular language or platform, it's learning about higher level abstraction, like a tool like Salesforce, or a platform like Heroku or AWS, or a platform like Force.com. So classroom training is nice, certifications are nice, but the world has moved on to online self-paced learning, where the knowledge matters more than the certificate which you earn at the end of the course. So with this, what I'll do is I'll open the house for questions. Quite a few. Okay, let me start with the first one. I am not a developer but a Salesforce admin, but trying to get into development. What would be an ideal path for being professional Salesforce developer? Very interesting question and very relevant. So for a Salesforce developer, the first step is basically to learn a language called Apex, which is basically a simpler version of Java. So it has been designed in such a way that it's easy for non-programmers to pick up programming. So it's basically a subset or a simplified version of Java, which you can very easily get started with. Now, I would say, focus on starting with Apex and a little bit of Visualforce, and once you are comfortable with both of them, go towards some of the newer UI offerings we have in the form of Lightning. Now, where should you get started with this? I would say explore the Apex and Visualforce modules we have in Trailhead, And once you are done there, then you can go to the developer docs and the reference docs. I hope that answers your question. Now let us move on to the next question, which is about Azure. How about Azure as PaaS? Yeah, very interesting question. Uh, so I remember when Google launched Google App Engine in 2008. So Microsoft also announced Azure. So it was basically a platform as a service offering, very pure play offering, which only supported .NET, right? But as I was mentioning in my talk earlier, a few slides back, most of the platform as a service vendors were struggling, and same was true for Microsoft. And then they realized that developers, they are not ready to let go. They still want command line access. They still want to control the OS patches. They want to control the stack they install on the operating system. And that is where Microsoft decided to make Azure not only a PaaS platform, but also an infrastructure as a service platform, right? So I hope that answers your question. So Azure is still a PaaS platform, but their infrastructure is much more successful than PaaS. Moving on to the third question, what is machine learning niche product on force.com platform? So, so we announced a product called Wave Analytics, which is not exactly a machine learning platform, but it's basically a visualization platform. And I can't really comment at this point in time uh, what we are doing with machine learning specific products on force.com, but stay connected on announcements in the future. So as and when we have something to offer, we'll announce it in the relevant channels. Moving on, uh, being a fresher, will I get opportunities? Uh, so I assume your question is that will my employability uh, options improve if I learn Salesforce? Definitely. I mean, we are seeing a huge gap in demand and supply. When I say gap, what I mean is that supply is much lesser than demand right now, be it either India or US or anywhere in Europe. And the salaries being offered to Salesforce developers are much higher than a pure Java or .NET developer. So I would say focus on the knowledge part and try to learn the why part, not the how part. You'll definitely be in demand. What is a typical salary of SFDC developer with 8 to 10 years of experience? It's difficult to give a ballpark figure. It depends on which country you are in. But as I said, the demand is very high, and definitely the salary which people are ready to offer to a Salesforce developer is much higher, if not at par with a Java developer or SAP developer. And plus, it's not only about the salary, it's also about the growth and the future. So I would say as a developer, focus less on salary and more on, if I invest in this platform, what does my future look like 5 years down the line? So what are the tasks of meetup groups? So meetup groups are basically formed. It's basically a community-driven initiative supported by Salesforce, where you can join and share your experiences uh, about learning on the platform. Also, learn from others. I would say it's a knowledge sharing platform where you can go and present what you have built, what you have learned, and also participate in hackathons. There are a lot of interesting activities happening in the meetup groups. Do you think Lightning is the future of Salesforce Cloud over Salesforce Classic? Yes, so Lightning is the future. If you have noticed that all our the standard UI, whether it's Sales Cloud or Service Cloud or Community Cloud, is being ported to Lightning. So Lightning is the future in terms of the UI stack for us. And you as a developer should also focus on trying to learn Lightning design system, and build Lightning components which will help you build a better user experience. And moving on to the next question, as we see Microsoft gaining some pace on Microsoft Dynamics, how do you see it competing with Salesforce? So I don't want to comment on a specific competitor, but Salesforce definitely has a very strong momentum in the market. Obviously, there will be other players, and they will have strong offerings in the niche segment. They would definitely see momentum, but I would say that by far we are still the leader and we are not losing market share. So, uh, moving on to the next question. As a system administrator, which track should I select? I would say you can start with the Salesforce admin, but if you're a system administrator, I'm assuming you would already know a little bit about programming, and you can also try Apex, and if it makes sense, move on to the developer track. Moving on to the next question, I'm currently Dev 401 certified, but have been working 5 years on the platform. How relevant are other certifications like Sales Cloud, Service Cloud? But until you apply that knowledge, it will not be useful. I think what you're saying is right. Certification definitely has a leverage when you are working in a consulting company and they have to pitch your profile to the customer. But it does not certify that you are knowledgeable. It only certifies that you are able to answer those questions. So that is where Trailhead comes into picture. Trailhead forces you to actually do stuff and then goes and checks that stuff. And I would say that you should focus more on knowledge than mere certifications. So I hope that answers your question. Moving on to the next question, is JavaScript and JavaScript framework used more in Salesforce development? Yes, as we move towards Lightning, you might have noticed that Java, most of the client-side controllers, helpers, all those classes are written in JavaScript. So JavaScript framework and language definitely is becoming more important. How about cross-platforming? Like I code for one platform, will it run on every platform? This is the next question. It's difficult to understand what the question means. So see, there are two things in cross-platforming. One is that because Salesforce is a web-based application, obviously, as long as we support that browser on that particular operating system, your application should run fine. And if we are talking about the mobile application, we have some specific set of devices we support, right? We don't have a pure native application, so the question of cross-platforming in that sense doesn't arise. Moving on to the next question, Salesforce is a cloud-based CRM tool. How it replaces traditional Java .NET application? Okay, good question. So as I said, Salesforce is not only a CRM tool, it's also a platform. Paas, Force.com is a platform. Heroku is a platform. Both of them are part of our a larger umbrella called Salesforce App Cloud. So you can pretty much build any application using Force.com or Heroku. It has it can obviously leverage the data which you have in your CRM, but you might as well build something which is totally a different use case or a different vertical. Okay, so how sales, let's go on to the next question. Does the Force.com environment offer integration with tools currently associated with data science, Python or R? As of now, we don't support data science tools uh, either using Python or R. What we have done is that there's a project called Big Objects, which allows you to store data beyond what SObject can support, and use pig syntax, Apache pig syntax, to basically query that particular object. Now there are so I can't really comment on what we are going to support in the future, but I would say stay tuned on offerings whenever they are ready to be announced, uh, assuming that you know assuming that you are interested in that particular offering, right? So moving on to the next question, I'm in traditional programming like working on ERP product. I want to move to Salesforce and my experience is 10 years. What would be my path as career would be? Uh, would it be developer or an admin? I'm interested to learn in developer and also admin. What would be the career path for a person with much experience on traditional side? Okay, like ERP, Java to Salesforce. So the question is basically uh, the developer has been working on ERP product for 10 years. Now, will he have a career option in Salesforce? Should he become a developer or an admin? Since you are already have been working with enterprise applications, familiar with programming to some extent and customization, I would say that you can easily go for a developer path. And within developer path, also, uh, the developer career path progresses towards architect. So what I would say is that you start with developer, then move towards architect kind of role. So how about IoT? This is the next question. So we had a product which was announced last Dreamforce on IoT. Still it works. Uh, so that's all I have to say on IoT as of now. But obviously you can use Heroku as a backend for IoT because IoT is all about storing key value pairs and time series data, and Heroku supports tools like Cassandra. Then it also supports tools like MongoDB, which can be used to store IoT data. Moving on to the next question. People who are good at Java, PHP, .NET, what are their scope and role? Okay. Uh, okay. So, Salesforce is not only about programming on Salesforce. A very important use case is how you can integrate Salesforce with other systems. So if you are already familiar with a stack like Java, PHP, or .NET, you could as well look at a career of a Salesforce integration developer. Somebody who basically leverages languages like Java, .NET, and integrates with Salesforce as a platform. At the same time, as I said, Apex is very similar to Java and it's object-oriented language. So don't get hung up that I already know this, that what is the future. So it's all about the first quote which I had in my presentation. It's all about unlearning and relearning. So it's good you know Java, PHP, but uh, it will also be good if you know a language like Apex. You also know how to build applications using Lightning components, and then you can leverage your knowledge in Java or PHP to do the integration as well. So are there any certifications for Heroku? I don't think there are certifications for Heroku yet. Moving on to the next question, is it okay to stick to a platform rather than language like Java and .NET? Obviously, if you stick with the platform, uh, the chances of career progression are higher. Uh, Obviously, the platform has to be backed by a company which is strong enough in the fundamentals. At the same time, that platform has to remain in demand for 10 to 15 years horizon. So I would say that focus on platform, but don't focus on a single platform. So there should be like your core should be one platform, but you should have a multifaceted skill set so that as the industry moves, so you can also move with the industry instead of being stuck in a world of Java or .NET. Okay, so let me see how many more questions are there. So we have a few minutes left. Uh, I'll take one or two more questions. The next question is, if I want to publish white papers on Salesforce, any place in particular you would suggest so that it catches eye of Salesforce experts and I can get feedback and mentoring? So I would say that blogging is a good way of showcasing your knowledge, at the same time sharing the knowledge, and use social media like Twitter and Facebook to talk about what you have shared. Obviously, uh, don't get disheartened if your content is not picked up immediately. It's all about sharing, and eventually, people will start noticing, and you'll be surprised that the power of social media is very strong, and if your content is interesting and useful, it will catch people's eye. So believe me that you'll be surprised and shocked at the kind of traffic you get if your content is interesting. Okay, so last question. I have 23 years IT experience. I'm trying to learn both admin and dev so that I can offer a complete solution. Is it possible to get remote work as an independent admin and dev? Uh, okay, so this is a very interesting question. We have seen a lot of very successful developers working remotely, and it's basically mind-blowing to see the kind of uh, work they get, the kind of people they are able to interact with. And this is all happening because our platform is on the cloud. At the same time, people are very comfortable in offloading work to consultants who are either independent or working in very small companies. So it's definitely possible to get work as an independent admin or dev, uh, and you should also leverage meetups and maybe talk to some of the MVPs on what they have done right, and you might want to work closely with someone. So for people whose questions were not answered in this webinar, please post those questions in the discussion board at bit.ly/discussion boards, and we'll try to answer those. With that, we come towards the end of this webinar. Uh, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. If we did not specify your question again, I want to repeat that please reach out to us in the forum. Uh, so again, thanks and enjoy your weekday, and hopefully we'll see you again in the next webinar. Thank you once again. Bye.